Hey, here we are in State College at the AccuWeather headquarters. Inside, we're going to meet up with my friend Geoff Cornish. He's going to give us a behind-the-scenes little tour here of what goes on here on a daily basis. Kind of cool. Let's go check it out. Hey, welcome back. Here we are at AccuWeather, the AccuWeather headquarters in State College, Pennsylvania. With me today is Geoff Cornish. Geoff Cornish is a meteorologist here at AccuWeather, and he loves talking about the weather. He's very good at his job, so I'm going to give Geoff a minute to kind of introduce himself and explain some things to you so you know where he's coming from.
All right, thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I love your show. It's really good. And Scott and I know each other because we're both firefighters with the Alpha Fire Company in State College, PA, and that's how the conversation got started. But I've worked at AccuWeather for about 5.5, almost 6 years now, and my wife and I met in the State College area. I went to school at Penn State, studied meteorology here. And a lot of people don't know that Penn State has one of the strongest meteorology programs in the world. Wow. So as an in-state school, it's a really good option. And that's ultimately how AccuWeather got planted here too. Dr. Joel Myers, about 60 years ago, started a company, and he is also a product of Penn State, studied meteorology at Penn State. And it's a nice place to live, so he set up his small weather forecasting business and basically approached a ton of different possible companies, ski resorts, DOTs, and landscape crews and so forth, trying to get business for a weather forecast enterprise. And a lot of the time, weather forecasts, they're freely available through the National Weather Service, but we can provide a little bit more information, or at least present it in a different way that provides more value to a lot of different companies and also to regular people too. So I worked here for 5.5, almost 6 years. I graduated from Penn State in 2004, worked for the university for 2 years doing the New York Times weather page. Now that's done here at AccuWeather. And then I worked in local TV in Joplin, Missouri, Lexington, Kentucky, Toledo, Ohio, and then Erie, PA, where I was the chief meteorologist and battled a lot of lake effect snow.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun. Cool. We averaged about 100 inches of snow a year there. But in 2017, my family and I moved back to State College, and I considered a job in Pittsburgh, and then the job here at AccuWeather, and kind of weighed the different options, and I'm glad I came here. So we, after being nomads for 11 years, just moving every 2 to 4 years, bought a house, and we're ready to be settled here now.
Very good. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you very much. This is I'm excited to be here. This is new for me, as I'm sure many of the viewers. This is kind of our first thing, so
it's fun.
Let's back up a second. You said you went to Penn State for meteorology. So what was it when you were younger that gave you that first spark to say, you know what, I want to do this for a living?
Yeah, my dad has always been a big weather enthusiast, and he still is in the Philadelphia suburbs. When there's a chance for big time snow, we would always want to be the ones who got the most. Or if there are thunderstorms, usually we'd like to get hit with them instead of miss them, because that's kind of an exciting news event. And part of the firefighter thing and the emergency response, there's a connection there. There's a connection.
Sure, absolutely.
We never want to see people get hurt in any form, but as a weather nut, most people who are into the weather probably can relate. We do prefer a big snowstorm or maybe a pretty decent thunderstorm, as long as you don't lose the roof and nobody gets hurt, over a partly sunny average day. So I think I got into that mainly because my dad and his brother, my uncle, and my aunt and my grandfather on my dad's side, all into the weather big time. And I love baseball and statistics, and the weather also, it really has, it kind of appeals, I think, to that interest. If you're into weather stats and numbers and things like that,
I can see that.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people, you experience it every day. It's the one aspect of the news that does affect everybody for the most part. Meanwhile, if you watch the local news, a home invasion or some kind of business news may or may not affect you, but the weather is something that is relevant to almost everybody out there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very good. So now we're standing inside one of the studios, or the studio they do the majority of their broadcasting from, which is kind of cool. So speaking of that, which part you do go live throughout the day at various times? What part of live broadcasting makes you the most excited? What part of that do you like the most?
I think for me personally is tracking severe weather, tornado threats or severe thunderstorms, where a lot of the time what we do is about making people's lives more convenient. How do I dress the kids? When's it going to rain? The inconvenience factor. But there are times when we can help to save somebody's life by providing relevant weather information in a truly dangerous situation. I always felt like that seemed kind of more theoretical than reality until I lived in Joplin, Missouri. We weren't there for the big tornado in 2011, but we were there for 2008's deadliest tornado. It happened to be on a weekend, and I was the weekend guy in Joplin, Missouri for the station that I worked at. And we had a long track EF4 tornado track through the southern third of our viewing area. And that whole concept of, we can potentially help to save a life, it became real to me in a big way. And we had, there were 24 people killed in that event.
Wow.
But we also heard back from viewers, and there was one letter I received where somebody said, we were watching, we took shelter in our basement. Most of our house was destroyed, but I was in the basement, and, because of our broadcast, they had a little bit more information than they would have had otherwise. So that's meaningful to me.
Sure.
A lot of the time in the fire service, the firefighters get a lot of the glory, and this would make a bad movie, but fire code and code enforcement probably saves more lives. It's a boring storyline, but there's a lot of that aspect to this too. Sure. Even when the weather may not be urgently dangerous in your area, if we're talking about best practices, trying to get into people's heads, don't drive around the barricade. A surprising number of people die every year in flash flooding. More people die in flash flooding than in tornadoes in a typical year in the U.S. And most of those deaths are very preventable. So a lot of this is about education, even on like blue sky days, as they say. So that we can make people's lives better. And also, we're so fragmented now in how we live our lives. We are a human aspect to the weather experience instead of just bringing up. We want people to use the AccuWeather app, which is great. But we also have videos on there, and we can provide context beyond the cloud icon and the number. So it's fun. It's fun. We get to do fun things too sometimes. Other cable networks will ask us to do a hit for them in big weather events sometimes. So it's kind of fun to do things for other parts of the world. There's a Russian-speaking cable network I got to do an interview with not long ago, and sometimes ABC, the national early morning broadcast, their weather team's not staffed until Good Morning America. So before that, there is an earlier national show, and a couple times a week, one of our schedule slots records a forecast that plays nationally on ABC. And there's some fun stuff. Sometimes Fox Business, or in the past Fox News, has asked us to do a weather hit. So, it's fun. And no 2 days are the same. There's always a big weather story somewhere.
Cool. That's kind of interesting. You get to kind of intermingle with some of the bigger networks, which I'm sure has its perks and benefits.
Absolutely.
But I do want to back up real quick to the when you brought up about the emergency services part being affected by the weather.
Oh, man.
Specifically, the wildland stuff. The wildland firefighting. Weather is such a huge thing with that. And, a lot of those command posts that they have at those incidents, they have somebody with your knowledge and your education there with the command post to constantly 24/7 watching the weather during those events.
It's really cool. An incident meteorologist in IMET is sent to a lot of the big wildfires, typically in the west, sometimes in the east, and they're usually provided by the National Weather Service. But people, a lot of the time, I think we jump to how dry has it been and is it hot out? But in reality, the humidity and the wind are huge drivers in wildfire behavior, along with the pre-existing, moisture content of the plants and the vegetation And there's a big connection there. And even if you get, 2 inches of snow in October, we had an event back about 18 or 19 years ago in State College, maybe 20 years ago now, where we had 3 inches of snow in October. The leaves were still on the trees, and we had 40-some fire calls, and most of them were real low level, just wires down, trees down over wires. But it's an exciting thing for the fire service. Sometimes it's exciting at first, and then it becomes kind of drudgery after your ninth interruption in an attempt at sleeping. But there's a huge connection between the weather and the fire service. 0.02 of an inch of freezing drizzle can make I-99 a mess. Or even just in a college town, we really see how people's behavior is tied to the weather. We run on a lot of false alarms and nonsense calls on Friday nights and Saturday nights, especially when there's a home football game. And if it's wet out, you can cut that number in half because kids aren't partying as much. And there are fewer false alarms at the frat houses and whatever else if the weather's crummy. But on the other hand, we owe on more accident calls and that kind of thing on wet roads.
Sure. Good. So now, I did mention the live broadcast here at certain times. Is there a certain time that you have specifically? I know there's numerous meteorologists that have specific times. Which is what is your specialty with that, and what slot do you have specifically?
I'm the assistant chief meteorologist here. So our chief meteorologist for the network, I should say, is Bernie Brano. He hosts the morning shows along with Christina Schauhoop, and then I tend to host from 4 to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday. And we have a good team. We have about 10 or 12 on our broadcast team. We have a really good crew.
Cool.
So there are times when our schedules get turned upside down or whatever else, but typically from 4 to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday I'll be on.
Okay, good. Yeah. And there's so much that goes on behind the scenes here. When you see the live broadcast, obviously you're just seeing typically one weather professional giving you the information. However, there's so much here that goes on behind the scenes up in the offices, behind the studio here. There's all kinds of programming and stuff with the apps and stuff like that, which is really interesting. And we're going to show you in a bit. We're going to take a walk around, give you kind of a taste of what else goes on here. But so with like the app that you use, the AccuWeather app.
Yeah.
Is that in conjunction with any other major networks or any other major weather resources, or it's strictly for AccuWeather?
It's really ours. I mean, the user interface designers, the translators for people who might use it in China or in Brazil, it's all coming from here. And the forecast content's also coming from here. The artwork, all the graphic design behind it as well. It comes from AccuWeather. It's pretty cool. Now, some of those employees work remotely, but it ultimately does come from us. And we are coming into the media landscape kind of the opposite way. Local TV is trying to figure out how to make money off of the app and the website, because traditionally their revenues come from selling commercial spots for the broadcast. We've been a very strong app and website for a long time, and now we're kind of sticking our feet the past 7 or 8 years into the broadcast world with our own cable network. Now, we've been doing broadcast type content for 25 years or so, and we've been doing radio broadcasts for decades and decades, but having our own network is kind of a newer thing. It's less than 10 years old. We're still growing, and we're in a steady vector of growth, which has been good. Every other year we're adding another big carrier, big cable network to carry us, or DirecTV in 2019, 2018. That was a huge step up for us. When I started, the only carrier was Verizon Fios and then Frontier in the West. Okay. And now we have, between some of these streaming services, about 20 different carriers. And that number grows every year, so it's good to be growing. But yeah, our revenue stream as a company is far more tied to the app and the .com than what we're doing now. Some of this, we certainly want to be making money off of every line of business, but one aspect of what we're doing is promoting the AccuWeather brand. Growing up outside of Philadelphia, I totally knew what AccuWeather was because you put on Channel 6 in Philadelphia, and they were our first TV client, WPVI, and we're still with them. We've been with them for, I think, more than 40 years. Or if I brought up, KYW 1060 as a kid, you hear the AccuWeather forecast there. But then when I moved to Joplin, Missouri, people like, what's AccuWeather? And I'm not sure if we have the Joplin Globe as a client or not, but there are many smaller markets where, if you look at the weather page in the newspaper, you'll see meteorology by AccuWeather or something like that. But that's not as in your face as Channel 6 growing up watching the news or hearing 1060 on the radio. WBZ in Boston, WIMS 1010, some of these powerhouse radio stations, our own people are the weather voices promoting the weather forecast there.
Interesting. Yeah, good stuff. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's so much that goes on with this stuff. The average person just wouldn't know or understand.
Well, and you know, this, I think the most interesting stuff of our interesting line of business has to do with what we do with the Fortune 500 companies, Lowe's and Conrail and some of these other, the big dogs. Some of these are obvious. You know, if you're in transportation, you're trying to keep the trains safe. And we have success stories of you know, the Greensburg tornado about 18 years ago or so. There is a story where there are two conductors that stopped their trains because of the weather forecast provided by AccuWeather, and both, as the story goes, saw the tornado pass between them.
Oh,
you know, you can't stop a freight train out there in the plains all that easily.
Yeah.
You know, it took some lead time. But some of the other stuff, it's much more, you know, if a company like Walmart changes the fabric that lines their produce stands, it sounds so trivial, but they do things on such a crazy scale, they can make money off of that. It makes a difference. So one thing that we do with a company like Lowe's, we help to more intelligently trigger their advertising, their digital advertising, based on the weather forecast.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, you know, what they need to advertise in their Bismarck stores would be very different than Gainesville, Florida.
Sure.
And that may change. You know, people are going to buy what they're interested in at the moment. And their interests are going to be closely tied to the weather.
Sure.
So
Makes sense.
as the weather forecast changes day to day, week to week, for Bismarck or for Gainesville, our weather forecast team provides information to Lowe's, and their digital advertising, even that people might see on, I don't know, if they're on an app streaming music or whatever, it may show a generator instead of a rake, or a snow shovel instead of lawn seed, or something like that.
Sure.
And that can be done more closely tied to the weather than just saying, all right, in March we should sell this, in April we should sell that. And if you can increase their revenue by 1%, there's a lot of money to be made, even for those providing that intel. That gives them a little bit more, more punch, I guess, for their advertising dollar.
Yeah. Interesting. That's a side of it that many people probably don't think of or even know.
It's totally, you know, I think a lot of us often just jump to like the transportation safety aspect of things, and also long-term forecast. There's a lot of the money that can be made, or at least more efficiency that can be done, if it's April, say it's February 15th, and you are a huge company. You need to decide if we're going to send, 20,000 snow shovels and bags of ice melt to all of our New England stores, or is spring coming early? That's a lot of truckloads or train loads or whatever it might be.
A lot of money involved in that. You make the wrong decision.
Absolutely. Restaurant staffing, it's based on people's moods. Are there going to be, do we need 7 waiters or waitresses or 5? If you have a small mom and pop chain, you're not going to find enough of an improvement to your business. But if you have 200 stores or 800 stores,
it's a huge impact.
Yeah, and you found a pretty strong correlation between weather and business, maybe you can staff more appropriately based on that 7-day forecast or something like that. So it's pretty interesting stuff.
Very good, good.
Yeah.
Now, I want to, in recent times, storm chasers have become very popular due to Hollywood and now social media. And they play a pretty big role in your broadcast.
We have our own storm chasers. Yeah. Tony Lawback is a meteorologist and storm chaser. We also work with Reed Timmer, extreme meteorologist. Reed Timmer is what we call him. He's one of the, if not the most famous storm chaser, partly because of the show that he was featured on the Discovery Channel years ago. But yeah, we have learned that people have a huge appetite to see what's going on when storms hit.
Sure.
And we tap into a lot of resources to get video, but we do also have our own storm chasers and reporters. And then we also sometimes will hire specific storm chasers, or there are freelance storm chasers that go out. They'll shoot crazy video, and there may not be any money to be made some days, but other days, if they get that money shot, it's a dangerous thing. We would never recommend doing this. But some of these people are, they're totally self-employed, and they will then sell the amazing video that they shoot to all the media entities that might have interest in them, and sometimes we'll feature some of that stuff too. So yeah, it's interesting, and it's way easier than it ever has been. We were talking about how you can look at high-res radar on an app, as opposed to a friend of mine in Northwest Ohio who used to chase before it was cool. He says
the old school way.
Yeah. Monitor, printer, extension cord, and then the desktop computer, and he would take phone line and try to convince convenience store managers to let him plug in, borrow their phone line, and he'd print out one radar image, tear it all down, and then take that already outdated image on the road chasing.
That is interesting. It makes you realize the technology we have, how much it makes our lives easier nowadays for stuff like that you don't think of, but people do it.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Again, it's not recommended, but if you want to go,
right.
Hey, feel free. So,
yeah. Yeah.
What is with all of the aspects of weather, snow, rain, storm? Is there any specific type of weather event that you enjoy talking about or you enjoy covering specifically?
I personally have become reasonably good at tracking tornadoes and severe thunderstorms with the radar, just because I work those hours. And with anything, whether you're basket weaving, doing career firefighting or volunteer fire, whatever, the more you invest into anything, the better you're going to get.
Sure.
So I spend a lot of time doing that on the particular shift that I work, the afternoon, early evening. So that, I think, is one thing that I like doing. But I also love snow. A landfalling hurricane is a dangerous thing, but it's also a very interesting storyline to tell.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah. Partly because there's the buildup and there's multiple days that lead up to that event, and I don't know. It's a fascinating thing to be part of.
Cool.
In local TV, you might cover 15 or 30 or 45 counties, and here we cover the whole country. Right. So when high pressure parks over your local TV viewing area, there are times when it gets a little bit sleepy. But we always have a story to tell here. There's always something big going on. We had over 2 feet of snow the day before we recorded this in Nebraska, and now the upper Midwest is getting hammered. Just rain in State College as we record this on a winter day, but there's always something big going on somewhere.
Cool, very good. So now, when it comes to Mother Nature, we all know Mother Nature has a mind of her own.
True.
And sometimes, unfortunately, in your profession, you got to deal with making a prediction, because that's what you got to do, and sometimes it's wrong, because Mother Nature goes a different direction.
It's true.
Part of the job. Some people, they get angry about it. I guess you're planning your life around a weather pattern, so I guess I kind of get it. But they're human. They predict with what technology they have, and Mother Nature, we all know, can change at a moment's notice. So take it if you start following Geoff, and he makes a prediction you don't like, don't take it easy on him. He's a good dude. So.
Well, we usually at Alpha we had a fire police guy, Jack Zook. He passed away about 10 years ago. Hilarious guy. He was a fire police. But I miss him. He was so funny. He and Bob Donald, both of them passed within a few years, fire police. But they would give me a hard time. How many inches of partly cloudy do I have to shovel today? That kind of thing. Yeah. We are better than any other time in human history at forecasting the weather. But at the same time, as forecast skill improves, we're getting more specific farther out. Mm-hmm. So there have been times when the weather enterprise, maybe not just us, but the whole, when we have raised expectations along with the improvement in skill. So there was a time when people would never even consider trying to provide an hour-by-hour forecast for tomorrow night. Just try to be real generic. What will it be approximately for tomorrow's high, and that's it. Now we're taking it much farther down the line. Local TV, we see it as well there. Trying to get more specific. So that, I think, keeps perception in check. Nobody's going to say that forecasters are fantastic. They always nail it. And there are times when even tomorrow's forecast, things don't phase the way we expect them to. The atmosphere's, it's always going to keep us on our toes. We're never going to have this totally nailed down. And that's part of the fun puzzle of it all, too.
Sure, absolutely. So I want to touch on the production side of something real quick.
Yeah.
So I know from being a musician, and when you're on stage with 3-4 other musicians and you're playing, you all feed off of each other, and you get that vibe, you get that groove going. Yeah. It's kind of the same when you're in a studio on live TV. You have a producer who you have a good working relationship with, and it's all about that vibe and how well you work together. How much does that? The
other anchors too. There are people who you jive with, other people that take some time to kind of learn how to interact with each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that has a big effect on, I guess, you going live, standing in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Can sometimes, I guess, have a minor effect on maybe your body language or the way
confidence
you
is everything, and communication is subtle. But in my ear, I can hear the producer and the director. They can talk to me, give me a countdown, or say, "Hey, this live shot is dead. Something technologically went wrong, or the cell phone signal that was supporting this live shot in western Kansas died." That kind of thing happens on a fly. And sometimes, strange things happen in live TV. It's fun, a little bit of an adrenaline rush at times.
I guess,
when things get a little hairy, but you have to kind of keep the train on the tracks, because you can't just go to black or toss to a commercial break. We're locked into a certain format, and we got to fill that time, hopefully with relevant and engaging weather information.
Sure. Very cool.
Yeah.
So we could talk for hours here, but we got to keep this somewhat short. So there's a couple cool other things within the facility here that we're going to show you. We're going to take a little walk around, meet a few others, see a couple cool things. And Jeff's going to go with us, but this is kind of cool. We're standing in the live studio here, so I feel kind of somewhat important, I guess.
You're always important, Scott. Come on now.
So let's go take a walk around, and we'll check out some cool stuff.
So technology is improving the computer models that we use very heavily to forecast. And, we don't explicitly just take computer model output and say, all right, there's your forecast. Some of the skill in forecasting also is tied to personal experience in forecasting and knowing local geography and model biases. Some models tend to run too warm, too cool, too quick to phase storms together and strengthen them in too robust of a way. But the atmosphere is a little more predictable upstairs, about 15 or 20,000 feet up. So in computer modeling, we'll look at the overall flow of the atmosphere, comparing different models going out a few days into the future. And then it's easy to just kind of jump to maybe the actual forecast of precipitation, rain or snow. The reality is the actual rain and snow forecast is what people are most interested in, but that's at the end of this long chain of meteorological calculations and reasoning. So if any part of that chain has some imperfections, they're going to be carried farther down the chain, and the rain or snowfall forecast is often the first thing to be prone to errors. So, there's a lot at play with forecasting, but it's a fun thing. We're never going to totally nail it 100% of the time through the whole 7 or 10 or 15-day forecast, but we're getting better, and now a 3-day forecast is as good as a 2-day forecast was about 30 years ago, and a 5-day forecast now is as good as a 3-day forecast was about 30 years ago. So, we're making progress, able to forecast better into the future, but still, it's never going to be perfect. We're good.
Hey, we're here with Mark Mancuso. Mark is the senior man or godfather around here. Does a lot of cool stuff, and one specific thing he does is work with the Bermuda Weather Service, and he's going to kind of give us a brief introduction on what that's all about. Mark, have at it.
Okay, great. We have a lot of clients here at AccuWeather. Not only do our national broadcasts, but we also have specific clients. We have local markets such as San Diego, also Northeast Pennsylvania, which covers the Poconos, and one interesting one that we have is in Bermuda, of all places, but that's one of our clients, and they need some special care and attention when it comes to weather, because a lot of people like to get outdoors.
Sure.
It's a very marine environment, a lot of people vacationing in through here. So we have a little program, and it's called the ZBM. It's one of the stations here in Bermuda, and one of the clients, they have specific needs, and they give us specific maps that they do want to see, but also we can also add in certain things to throw in our personality and also our expertise. So here's just a peek at the show here. It's all these frames, and there's certain frames that we will add from a menu, satellite pictures, a future radar, and a specific forecast. And I'm going to show you this on the green screen so you can see a little bit better, a little bit easier. And this is what it would look like. So I got my little clicker here, my bar of soap, just kind of washing up and through here. So here's would be the typical broadcast. So you can see on the side monitors there, I'll show you that. And I'm looking into the front monitor, and your sponsor is BF&M. And of course we have it memorized from doing it so many times. So I would start this off. It's like a 3-minute segment, and say hello. Tonight's forecast is brought to you by the BF&M Insurance Group. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso. Okay, so tonight's AccuWeather forecast is brought to you by the BF&M Insurance Group. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso with you. Here's a quick peek at our weather headlines. We have a cold front approaching, and it's going to get windy here on Friday. Friday night, the front passes through with some wind and rain, and then for the weekend, it'll be cooler and drier with lower humidity, so the seas will stay agitated as we'll have some strong gusty winds. On our satellite picture this evening, see the high pressure here building over the western Atlantic. That's giving us our nice dry weather, but it won't last. Coming off the U.S. East Coast, we see a lot of clouds, a lot of moisture here. That's our weather maker. On the water vapor loop, yellow areas are drier. Where you see the white, it's more moisture. So there's a lot of moisture building to our west, and that will sweep through here Friday night. As we take a look at this evening's weather, well, you can see the temperatures are hovering in the upper 60s. We have a westerly breeze. Waves inside the reef about 1 to 3 feet, outside the reef about 5 to 8 feet. Now this is important, of course, because we talked about people here like to get out on their boats, heavy marine interest, so they like to see the wave action and the winds, and of course the water temperature. Then if there's any special advisories, we'll show them here. Small craft advisories, small craft warnings, that's what they call them here. In the US we call them advisories, they call them warnings. So small craft warning Friday morning through Saturday night, and this will probably be extended through the weekend. Tidal information is important, so we'll show you the high tides coming in this evening, and then early in the morning hours on Friday, low tide after midnight and shortly after lunchtime. Forecast tonight, well, we'll see some clouds thickening up. There's a warm front approaching. You'll see the clouds, temperatures in the 60s, a mild night. Tomorrow the warm front moves through, maybe a morning shower, then it gets windy. As that front approaches we were talking about, rain comes in at night. And as we take a look at special interest for the area here, there's a lot of people that live in Bermuda that come from different parts of the countries and the world, countries in North America and across the ocean. So we show you Toronto, New York, Boston, Atlanta, Miami, and London, skimming across the big pond. And we're kind of like a semi-tropical climate. Let's check out our friends in the tropics. Here we are, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, and the forecast. Then we show you the future cast, the future radar. So here comes the exterior rain. That's the front. Comes through Friday night. And then it gets windy over the weekend. The next storm system approaches. We show you the extended forecast. And then we say bye-bye. So that's your client. And to get some of that information, we can go right on over here. And we can look at the different places for weather information. One, of course, you'd go to AccuWeather in-house, our own system here that gives us all our data. And I can just type in the forecast for Bermuda. And so everything that I just talked about for Bermuda is going to show up in about 2 seconds here. Once this builds, probably in a time where we're gathering data, and here it comes. It gives us a little highlight for the weather. Look at that. High winds, gusts past 40 tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. That's the front approaching. And then you can see our specific forecast tomorrow. Damp in the morning, then windy in the afternoon, and then so on and so forth. So that's part of the forecast. That's the main meat of it, because we're showing our data to these people. But we can also go into the Bermuda Weather Service, get more specific data, like marine data. And so it gives us an indication of the wind forecasts, what they're expecting, and through here they have their own warnings graphic, small craft warning, so we can follow that along. And more information, tides showing up there too. And we can also go into tide tables, look into the future. So that makes it pretty easy for us to gather the information. And then another thing we can look at too, we could also go into our forecast models here. This is our in-house product. And so I could take a look at weather systems as they move off the U.S. They call specific maps. And Bermuda's out here. I could get a different map. But we can look at that too. We can see how that little system moves through with the rain. And there we go. Friday afternoon, it's getting closer to Bermuda. Friday night, boom, boom, boom. And then the next storm comes off the U.S. East Coast. So we have all that data to share. So we have our data, and we take it with the Weather Service. What's going on up in here? Here's the experience. Yeah. We mix it all together, and then voila, there it is.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Mark. Again, senior man, godfather. Don't make him angry or you pay for it. So, Mark, thank you very much. Your experience and knowledge really shines through when you explain this. So I appreciate you taking the time to
My
do this.
pleasure.
Hey, back here in a little booth, we got Bob Larson. Most of you may know him, radio personality. I'm sure you recognize him or recognize his voice from his years on the radio. And he has his little office back here where he spends most of his time. Many people don't realize that the radio personalities have to understand the weather as well, and not all do. The thing about Bob is that he does, so I'm going to have him kind of explain what he does to you a little bit and give you a little idea of what goes on here in his little world back here in this booth.
Yeah, the other thing that people oftentimes don't understand is that on a daily basis, I'm looking at the weather and delivering the weather forecast for locations all across the country, from Hawaii to New England and everywhere in between. Because so very oftentimes a person may hear me on the radio, perhaps a radio station in Portland, Maine, and wonder when I moved to New England. And I did not move to New England. I'm delivering the forecast to the Portland, Maine audience, or Miami, Florida, or Denver, Colorado, or writing the forecast for a newspaper in Hilo in Hawaii. It can all be done under one roof here in AccuWeather. There's still, I think many people have caught on to the idea that fine, okay, with today's technology, you can check out the weather no matter where you are, but it still surprises people to some extent. You watch the news or on a nightly basis, and if it's a network, you may be looking at an anchor that's working out of New York City or Washington, D.C., yet they're talking confidently about a news story that broke in somewhere in Europe or in South America, even though they're not there. It's the same thing with the weather. Through instrumentation, through today's technology, we can basically put ourselves into anywhere and can be just as versed with the weather conditions thousands of miles away as we are right outside the door.
Very good. So you started in 1983, 82 with the weather, and 83 with the radio.
Right.
What's the biggest, I guess, advancement or change you've noticed from the way you were operating in 83 until now?
So many things. I guess I would start with radar. When I think back to the way we received radar, first of all, it was very slow. It was a very slow process. Then get a radar image, and during the summertime, when you're trying to track thunderstorms that may have a shelf life of 30, 40 minutes, by the time you get an accurate radar, it may be almost 30 minutes old, and the storm that in the image that you have presented to you may be from a storm that is already dissipating and disappearing, or at the very least moved on. So now we can look at instantaneous radar with great detail and determine not only where it's raining or perhaps snowing, but in the case of severe thunderstorms, where there may or may not be tornadoes or hail, or certainly where the downpours are and whatnot. So that is a huge advancement in terms of the radar. The clarity of satellite pictures and images and whatnot has advanced greatly. And the computer models, some would say, particularly old-time forecasters, I guess I'm an old-time forecaster now, but even people that preceded myself would say that that's a curse with the computer models that we have now, the computer-generated forecast models that can, as I talk to trainees that come to us that start fresh out of college, and they start looking at these models and projections of what the weather is supposed to be doing a day, 2, 3 days from now, maybe a week or two in advance, I tell them that you're not looking at an answer key to the test. It is a computer-generated forecast model, emphasis on forecast, not reality. And some old school techniques still come into play. You'd say, okay, this is what it shows, but does that make sense? Does it make sense to have a heavy snowstorm in Charlotte, North Carolina in the last week of October? Look back at history. How many times has there been heavy snow in Charlotte during October? I'm not saying it can't happen, but is it really realistic? And it's, well, no, I guess not, but that's what the computer model shows. And lo and behold, a day or so later, he goes, oh, how about that? That model now shows that it's only going to be a cold rain and not snow. And say, yeah, how about that?
You're right. Right.
So you have to blend. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you throw the new information out. It's very helpful, but it is a guide. It is guidance. It is not a crutch. It is not the answer key. It is not the end-all, be-all. You have to blend old school techniques, traditional meteorology, with the new technology that's available to us. And that is a difficult art. I don't say I have the answer to that, because I've had cases where I rely on climatology and old school techniques, and the computer model sniffed out something that I hadn't considered. So it's a delicate balance. Much like, if I may go onto a tangent, with sports today, there's so much emphasis on analytics. And old school baseball scouts will say, I can look at the eye test and know that he's a great hitter and he's a fast runner and a great fielder. And you have your analytics, but the analytics make sure that they're a great hitter, but not in pressure situations, or not when it's cold, or not when it's rainy, or not when it's windy. Sure. And there's so many things that come into play. So it's a similar scenario.
Very good. Do you like being secluded back here all the time?
I don't mind it. I keep my thoughts to myself, and it's a matter of concentration, not being distracted by those around me. I don't spend my entire 8-hour shift in here.
Yeah.
I do certainly mingle. I certainly, when we get together for what we call map discussion, we discuss the weather in hand. I'm certainly out there with the group to offer my 2 cents worth and listen to other opinions. That is a very, very important feature of AccuWeather, as started by our founder, Dr. Joel Myers, who taught at Penn State University for many years. He strongly believes in the idea of consensus forecasting, the idea of the group. It's a bold play on the idea that 2 heads are better than 1, 20 heads are better than 1, when you get everyone put together and in a consensus formulation as to what may or may not happen. And the consensus forecast typically is going to be much better than any one given individual, no matter how gifted they may be in terms of forecasting.
Sure. Sure. Now, if anybody wants to listen to Bob's forecast, what hours are you on the radio? When do you go live?
Typically afternoons and early evenings at this point. It used to be just in the afternoons, and I don't do as much radio work as I used to, so it's mostly radio stations in the Northeast, occasionally out through the Midwest and cities such as Chicago. But again, it will be mostly after 1, 2 p.m. up to perhaps 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Okay, very good. Well, Bob, thank you for your time. I know you got a busy
You're
schedule.
welcome.
There you have it. Bob Larson, everybody. All right, here we are in the control room for AccuWeather. With me is Dan Hardman. Dan is one of the guys in here that makes all this magic happen when they're going with their footage for the live broadcast. I'm going to let him kind of explain some of the cool tools in here that they use. All these cool gadgets. I don't understand any of it, so I'll be learning this just like you. So Dan, give us a whirl here. What you got going on?
An overview of what we've got going on here. Okay, first off, this is where the director sits. Director is basically like the metronome of the newscast or live hit or whatever we're going to call it. It's basically keeping the pace and keeping things moving and keeping things going. Producer will sit back here, and they will put the show together saying this is the shot we want, these are the stories we want, this is what we've got going here. So the director takes that basically, even in film, same thing, director takes it, interprets the script. Well, we interpret what they've put together and say this is what they want. This camera on this person, they want this person here, so this camera. We take that and interpret it, and what we call code show on Inception. So we code it so when we're here, it comes up on our program, and we can basically, at this point, we're a button pusher, a monkey, but we're telling everybody and coordinating with everybody. In a bigger news station, the director would coordinate with your floor crew, they coordinate with the audio person, your camera guys, all your all the little parts, and they'd help coordinate to get it together to get the show on the air. In smaller ones where the overdrive will operate it, we tell you everything. It will operate the soundboard, and it operates this, which we call a switcher. So this computer right here can operate both these and playback video and operate our graphics. So the supers that pop up, the wipes we have, everything like that will come up through there. So we can operate all from here, and we have to code it all to say this is what we want it to do, because it's a computer. Mm-hmm. It needs to know what we want it to do and when we want it to do it. But when we want it to do it is whenever we hit the space bar or hit other commands like that. So we just continue to go through that and just push it along and move the show along with the pace. And here we follow along with what the meteorologists want to do and what they're going to. So if they want to move from a radar to their graphics and all that, we've got it here to where we can do it. But we're just basically listening to what they're saying and what they're talking about, and we move along with them. Sometimes it's not as quick as they'd like, and so we get can we go to this? Can we go? Hey. Or they go, and we'll be seeing this soon, and oh, shoot, okay. But yeah, there's lots of things we've got going on and we're doing back here, but it's I'd like to say it's as simple as once we get it done, and if you did everything right and things went smoothly, you could literally just hit this space bar each time you want to advance to something else and play a game, what I like to call tapper, where you can see it's like, because we have nothing going on, it's just coming up like that. But yeah, we do that and we just keep the show moving at that point. So it's a lot of little things and a lot of listening and using your ADHD in the right way.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I guess at some point or at some time you could have some technical difficulties that would require some troubleshooting from your end that
Yes.
you're going to have to rush because you want to get them back on air live and stuff. So
Yes.
Any particular time you remember that you had to kind of make sure you were moving?
There's several. I mean, I've had it where we've lost connection from here and the board, so we were basically stuck on one shot. But you can. The nice part about the way we have it set up here, if something happens to the computer that's not letting it operate, we can usually just scoot right over and operate the board from here and go back and forth between the two sources.
Okay.
So we've got several different ways of taking care of it. So if one piece goes down, there's the backup here. If this goes down, which is our graphics, we have no supers and all that, it's just, we'll work on that, and we just won't have anything up, and we'll have any 2 boxes or weird stuff that requires this. We'll just have source to source to source, which is basically what I was doing there. That's the source. That's it.
Okay. So typically you have at least one source
Yeah.
on the video.
Yeah.
You wouldn't completely lose everything.
No. Typically wherever you lost it at, wherever it went at, you'd have it there, but we'd have a way to get somewhere else. So, you know, they have a camera up, so if we had to get to camera 3 real quick, we'd come over here and just hit camera 3 online and get to it. Like, here's the program channel, so anything that you see coming up there would be going out over air.
Okay.
Anything on the other side, we're previewing it to say this is where we want to go to next. So if we want to go from camera 2 to camera 3, we can dissolve to it, we can take to it, and there's also, you know, like, there's sometimes, you know, the old school wipes and stuff that we can do too. But we can program all that into here as well, and run it all from here, which is nice because you've got our video sources here, and when we take to those, they'll automatically roll. So you're, you know, in a sense taking what, like 1, 2, 4 or 5 jobs and putting them down to one person. So that's a lot of, you know, a lot to sit there and do. But you know, sometimes rather than trying to make sure, having that delay of saying, okay, roll tape, and making sure that the guy who's supposed to roll tape is paying attention. So you have, you know, you're taking out that delay, saying, okay, update to the next graphic. You're taking out that delay, where, you know, you're doing it here. Now you're just worrying about the, you know, everything talking to each other and being cooperative.
Yeah, very interesting. So during a live broadcast, how many people are typically in here?
2 to 3.
2 to 3?
Yeah. So all that needs to be here is a director and the producer.
Okay.
So the producer's actually timing the show, saying, you know, like, we have 7 minutes for this segment, this block. They'll start timing from here, saying, okay, we've got our first weather hit. I only want 2 minutes for this, and then I want a minute for this story, and then another 2 minutes for this story. And so they're timing that out and letting the anchors know that, or meteorologists know that this is where we want, you know, stop talking now, you know, you've got this much time left, that kind of thing. And we're following along with that, and with us saying, okay, now we're moving on to the next thing and bringing it up. So, you know, there's 2 and there's some 3s, because sometimes we have our live shots that need to be brought up. So we have a person over here to help us out there too, bring it up. So, you know, it just kind of depends on the day. During bigger weather days, we'll have, I think, 4. Okay. So we have a director, we have 2 directors, one backing up the one, and then a producer and you know, an assistant helping them out with all the stuff they're doing. So it kind of, you know, it comes together and meshes together. So, but the 2 main people are the director and the producer. They're the 2 actually should be in charge of the show and running the show. So
very good. What is your favorite part of being in here?
Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those jobs. It's nice because you get to come in and it's different every day. I mean, it's the same in the way that this is what you're doing every day, but because of the stuff that we're putting on and some of the little challenges that will happen and everything, it's different. So it's never just, okay, let's come in and, you know, do the same thing over and over and over. There is that portion that is the same. Yeah, we're coding each show. Each show feels like it's just this, that, but what's going on the air, what's happening is different, and it's nice. And you get to learn more stuff, you know.
Yeah.
We have a very smart meteorologist here, and they will teach you all the stuff that you need to know to get on the, you know, to understand the weather better. And I find some of that stuff just fascinating. You know, it's just like the science of it and everything is it's all. I mean, that's the best part. You know, you get to learn some things, but you're also putting stuff out and doing a good show. And at the end of the day, you're done.
Yeah.
There's nothing to sit there and go, oh, I've got this, you know, to still take care of for tomorrow. No. When we're done, we're done. We could go home, enjoy our night. You know, I mean, yeah, you may hound on, I should have taken that a little earlier, I should have done this a little earlier for that. But it's out there now, it's in the world, it's out in space. You know, it's over with, so you get to just go, okay. So it's, you know, it's very stressful when you're doing it, but then you can just water off a duck's back.
Cool. It definitely seems like a really cool job.
Yeah.
Cool, good stuff. Well, there you have it, in the control room here at AccuWeather. Sir, thank you very much for the explanation.
You're welcome.
I know you guys are busy, but you're taking your time out of your day to help us out, so I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And let's go check something else out. Jeff's going to take us down the hall.
So this wall has some of the history of AccuWeather, and it started back in 1962 when Dr. Joel Myers, who still is very involved with the company when he started AccuWeather, and he had to take a lot of no's before he got his first yes, trying to find the first client that he could convince somebody that he could provide meaningful weather info beyond what was available through, say, the National Weather Service at the time. And the first client was a Pennsylvania utility company. In 1963, he got involved with forecasting information and trying to figure out how ski resorts can best make snow, on cold nights when there's not natural snow falling. So some of the first clients involved ski resorts in Pennsylvania and the Northeast in snowmaking intel, which is kind of cool. And then over time, we began to serve newspapers and radio and hundreds of radio stations, 700 newspapers. We still produce the forecast content for 700 newspapers. As time progressed, we began to do more TV-type stuff with at least hits for different networks and so forth and clients. We moved to this building in 1998, and our global website became available in 33 languages in 2010. Now it's available in more than 100 languages, which is really cool. 2015, we started our network, the cable network, which is now approaching 8 years old. And on down the list here, we got picked up by DirecTV, which was a big step up for us. In 2020, we were serving 700 newspapers, 800 radio, and 100 TV stations. And we do a lot of cool stuff with the Fortune 500 companies as well in ways that may not be all that obvious. And in some form, our forecast reaches, we say, 1.5 billion people every day. Now, most people, that's almost a quarter of the world, most people don't realize they're getting an AccuWeather forecast, or maybe a fifth of the global population. But a lot of people may not know us by name, but they might be seeing a forecast on a digital display in Beijing, or they might be seeing or hearing a forecast on the radio or maybe on a streaming service that we provided some information for. So it's pretty cool how here at State College, PA, also with our offices in New York and in Wichita, and in smaller offices in other parts of the world that are part of AccuWeather, we can reach so many different people, different cultures, different parts of the world.